Today's the 24th of August, 2006. We are at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Bellevue, Washington. We will be talking to Mr. Thomas Pelle today, born on May 24th, 1924. Attending the interview, myself, Emily Mount, and Derek Poppy, our cameraman. We're with the 307th Bombardment Group 2006 reunion. Today we'll be hearing about Mr. Pelle's experiences in World War II. He served in the Army Air Corps as a tech sergeant in the South Pacific. Okay, the stage is all yours.
Okay.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about how you got into the military, where this all
Well, I
started?
got into the military because the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
It's a good place to start.
Excuse me. I don't like to think about that. I graduated from high school in May 42, joined the Air Force in August 20th, 42. And joined the aviation cadets, but I washed out. So they had too many of them, and I like to think that, and that wasn't because of me. But I went to basic training at Keesler Field, Mississippi, and I was supposed to be in, when you washed out of cadets, you got your choice of anything you wanted to be. So I'd be an airplane mechanic. But I got to Keesler Field, and we took a bunch of tests, including radio, and the guy that gave the test came to me and said, "You ought to be a radio operator." Because what I did okay on the diddy-da-das and all that. So I said, okay. So I'm glad I did. I'd rather be a radio operator than a mechanic anyhow. So I went to Stevens Hotel in Chicago, and just biggest hotel in the world. I've forgotten the name of it now. But anyhow, I got halfway through radio school and they closed it down. They sent part of us to Madison, Wisconsin, and I went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and started all over again. The boys thought I was smart because I knew so much, but I'd already had half of it. And graduated from there, and I think in November of 43. No. Yeah. 43, yeah.
How would they be training you at these different places? How would they be training you at the different places?
Well, we took code classes in Chicago, first at the Armory on Wabash Avenue, and I remember the code instructor's name, Mr. Friend. And it took mechanic classes at the Congress Hotel and at the Stevens Hotel, depending on what they were teaching. And they closed it down. We went to South Dakota, Sioux Falls, and I started all over again, which was a help. I needed to learn some of this stuff twice. But I learned International Morse Code, and I had credit for 30 words a minute, but you couldn't take about 16 words a minute when flying because there's so much noise. So 16 words was the average what you sent and received when you're flying. And it was my job to send in a mission report. We'd bomb a target, and the bombardier and the officer would give me I had a form to fill out, and then I'd read that off, and I'd send it in code, not text, plain text, but in code. And in case we got shut down before we got back, they'd know what happened. So we had radio silence on the way to the target, but after we hit bomb, we didn't have radio silence anymore. So, but in crew training, at 2 incidents, we were bomb training at night flying bomb, and we almost collided with another B-24. He was coming like this, he was coming like this. We saw him at the last minute. This was 2 o'clock in the morning. Our pilot dove, and the other pilot, fortunately, pulled back on the wheel. 2 o'clock in the morning, I could read the numbers on the nose of the plane. That's how close we were. That was incident number 1. incident number 2 was also at night bombing. We finished early, so the pilot thought, well, I'll give the co-pilot some practice flying the plane landing. And so he did, and we landed at Tonopah, Nevada. He made a perfect landing, so he gunned it, and we took off again, they flew around. He coming back, and I was standing between the pilot and co-pilot, and I mentally pulled back on the wheel, and the co-pilot didn't. And that scared me. He flew right into the runway, broke all 3 landing gear off, and went skidding down the runway, with sparks flying up into the bomb bay. It set the putt-putt fluid on it. Putt-putt is little gasoline engine that you start, so you can start the engines. The engines have a generator, but when the engines are not running, the generator's not running, so you start it with the putt-putt. And once they start the engines, they cut the putt-putt off and the generators take over. Well, gasoline caught fire, and we got out of the plane through the, well, I was up front, so there's an escape hatch in the roof of the B-24, just in front of the upper turret. We had on winter flying suits, and I could hardly get out. The big sheep-lined suits and pants and boots and gloves. So I had pilot, he was the last one out of the plane, I was the next to the last, and he shoved me out. And he put out the fire in the putt-putt. And that was his second incident. The third incident, we were flying from Travis Air Force Base to Hickam Field, Hawaii. Well, B-24 doesn't have enough gasoline in the wing tanks, so we had 2 bomb bay tanks and a fuel transfer pump temporarily put on the floor of the bomb bay. Well, we were on automatic pilot. The pilot was in the nose asleep, the co-pilot was in the waist. I was in the pilot seat, and the bombardier was in the co-pilot seat. All of a sudden, he let out a scream. I looked over to see what the matter was, and I could see the number 3 prop was just standing still. It had run out of gas, which meant the other 3 didn't have much gas either. So I called the pilot up and the engineer. He got to work on this, took the fuel pump, transfer pump apart. It's lubricated by gasoline, I think. And put it back together, and it didn't work. It teared apart again. The second time it worked. They pumped gasoline out of the belly tanks into the wing tanks. Then they started the engine. But in the meantime, nobody was paying any attention where we were going. We were on automatic pilot. Well, the wind was drifting us south. Well, pretty soon the pilot saw a mountaintop. He said, "There's Diamond Head." The navigator says, "No, it's not." "Yes, it is." "No, it's not." "Yes, it is." "No, it's not." So he peeled off down there. We landed on Maui. Good thing, because if we were going straight, we were going right between Maui and Oahu, and we would have joined Amelia Earhart. So we landed on Maui on a mountaintop naval airstrip and refueled, and then we took off and flew to Hickam Field. Then we flew to Canton Island, and Canton Island to Guadalcanal. And then they took our pilot and sent him to the 424 Squadron, which left us without a pilot. So we had to wait around about 2 weeks before we got a pilot. And we got one who'd survived the ditching. He and the tail gunner were the only 2 that survived the ditching. And they shouldn't have ever put him back on flying B-24s. I flew about, well, we finished our training in Guadalcanal and moved up to Los Negros in the Admiralty Islands. And I flew 2 missions out of there. First one was to Sorrel Island. It was supposed to be the Yap, but we had an engine or some kind of problem. It might have been the pilot, I don't know, but we had a problem. They had to transfer the bombs to another airplane, and we took off about a half hour behind the rest of the group. We never did catch them before we wouldn't go bomb Yap by ourselves. So we bombed the secondary target, Sorrel Island. And the next time, we made it to Yap. And yesterday I saw a guy, he'd been to Yap, and he was talking about it. And I remember Yap very well. Then we moved I flew about as many fat cat missions as I did. You know what a fat cat mission is?
I haven't heard that, I just don't know.
It's, you go down and you fly, well, one of them, we went to Mackay, Australia, bought $10,000 worth of whiskey and gin for the officers club. And one time we flew into Finch Haven and bought supplies and things like that. And I delivered B-24s from Guadalcanal to Port Moresby, New Guinea 3 times. But you don't get any credit for flying that. They call them fat cat runs because well, they just do. And where was I? Oh, yeah, we moved to WWII Island, which is a little island off the coast of Dutch New Guinea. And our target there was Pelle Islands. And we had Core Town on Core Island. But we had specific instructions not to hit the geisha house. I don't think we did. But our next mission, we took off, and we were flying on the left side of the formation. We flew into a thunderstorm. Well, the formation had to spread so we wouldn't fly into each other. Well, we flew for hours in the thunderstorm. All of a sudden, we popped out, beautiful sunshine, almost over Pelle Aerodrome. Another B-24 in sight. So the bombardier hurried up and we laid a string of bombs down the runway. We surprised the Japanese. We came out, this clouds. They didn't have time to shoot at us or anything. We didn't get any planes off. And so that was a good thing. And we made it back. And then I went to, I don't know, the Halmahera Islands. We bombed that 3 times, I think. And then Saram, we bombed that once. And then we moved to Numfor in Heelink Bay, right here. Yeah. And we flew a mission to Numfor to Balikpapan, Borneo. And that's where I got hit. We had, the 24 B-24s, September the 30th, a group went there and they bombed them, surprised them, they didn't expect them. Well, next day, the 1st of October, we were all lined up on the runway, ready to take off, and they called the mission off. You know why? The wind was blowing in the wrong direction. That's how close they had the gasoline figured. So we postponed it a day. The 2nd of November, we took off midnight of the 1st, and we got to the Balikpapan at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's 9 hours one way, so that's an 18-hour mission. And we got to Balikpapan, but they knew we were coming. We had one plane had to turn back, and so there were 23 of us went over 11 B-307 bomb group and 12 5th bomb group. 307, in fact, the 371st Squadron was the lead squadron. And our lead plane got shot out before we hit the target. And I just recently found out that one of the guys survived and was taken prisoner, Japanese. And he died shortly after he came home after the war. But anyhow, we got to Balikpapan and they shot the lead plane down. And the lieutenant that had it there in the A2 position took over the lead. He had 3 engines, one of them was shot out. He took over the lead and we bombed him. And they shot down 7. And one plane made it back to where we took off from. Half of the ones that didn't get, they hit all of them, hit 100% of the planes. But half of them landed at Morotai, and we landed, and the other half of us landed at Cape Sanseport, New Guinea. And but I was hit over the target, and we had, I think, I don't remember, it was like 420 holes in the plane. And I just watched the Japanese plane. We were almost airplane number 8 because this Japanese plane coming down, it occurred to me later he was trying to crash into us because we were flying along. He came down like this. He was going to crash this right wing into our left wing. But he missed, and he came down. I looked at him right in the eyes. I could see his goggles, his nose, his mustache, and his teeth. He was smiling. That's how close he was. He was probably 50 feet from me. But I don't remember if that was before or after I got hit, but it was right about the same time. But I heard a loud boom and saw part of the back of the bomb bay open up. And boy, I looked down, I saw a GI shoe with a piece of a leg sticking out of it. Whose is that? I looked down, it was mine. I didn't even feel it. It hit me in both legs, took a piece out of the calf of my left leg and shot my right one off below the knee. And I didn't even feel it. So I tried to, the procedure was if you were hit, call a navigator and let him know you were hit. So I called up there 3 times, but I noticed after the 3rd time, this gash about this long on the side of the plane where my intercom box was, I just had my wire dangling in front of me. So holding on to the machine gun, I turned around to get the armor gunner to come up front. Well, he was lying on the floor. So I looked back at, we had a cameraman on, this time we had 11 men, there was a cameraman on board. I looked back to the cameraman and motioned for him to come up and take over my machine gun. And I went back and called back by the camera hats and lay down. And I could see the blood spattering against the side of the plane, so I reached out and tried to stop it. But my left arm was asleep because I was lying on it and went to sleep right away. And I passed out. And when I came to, I was lying up where the armor gunner had been. But the co-pilot came back and got their armor gunner, carried him up through the bomb bay and front to make room for them to stretch me out. And the tail gunner, I don't know what they used for tourniquets, but probably their belt, I guess. The tail gunner was, he took care of the tourniquets, and the engineer and the bombardier took care of the, we had 2 syringes of morphine and 2 bags of blood plasma. And they gave me everything they had. And that's why I'm here. I'd been dead 60-some years ago. But they didn't think they could keep me alive until we got back to Newport. Was it? Yeah, Newport, yeah. And they probably couldn't have, because I had 10 more transfusions when I got on the ground. But I woke up twice on the way back and saw what they were doing. But I'd throw up and pass out again. But I woke up again the 3rd time as they were passing me out the waist window, and I could see the doors in the ambulance. But I didn't, I just passed out again. And I woke up once in the operating tent. You've heard of MASH? Yeah. I was operated on in a MASH. It was the 13th Portable Army Surgical Hospital, PASH. Well, in the Korean War, they changed it to mobile, changed portable to mobile, MASH, MASH. But it was the same type of thing. And I came to once, and they had this shiny thing up above that reflects the light, and I could hear sawing. And I looked up and I saw what they were doing, so I quietly passed out again. It was my leg he was sawing on. In the reunion, the 13th Air Force reunion in Springfield, Missouri, the guy was telling me he was walking past, it was in the 42nd Bomb Group, a B-25 outfit at Cape Sansport. Well, that's where my operation was. He was telling me he was walking past the tent, he heard a sawing noise. And so later on, he asked the surgeon what the sawing was. They were sawing some guy's leg off. He said, yeah, it was me. So I went from there to the 27th General Hospital in Hollandia, New Guinea. And a distant cousin of mine was on General MacArthur's staff. And he discovered I was there, so he came to see me. I'd shipped out the day before. And on the General David C. Shanks. But we went down to Finchhaven, New Guinea, and picked up some more people, and then went down below the Solomons, and I had to avoid Japanese submarines, so we took a long way around, and got into San Francisco on December the 8th, I believe, 1944. And I was in Letterman General Hospital for about 2 weeks, and they put us on a train, a hospital train. It had stretchers instead of seats. and sent us to Temple, Texas, McCloskey General Hospital. I was there for about 11. I got there Christmas 23rd of December 1944, and I was there November the 15th, 45. They couldn't operate on my leg again because I had picked up an infection in both legs, and that they kept draining. And I said 420 holes in my plane. I get 420, that 400 some odd penicillin shots every 3 hours around the clock. Whether you were asleep or not, you got every 3 hours. So I got tired of waking up, so I wouldn't even wake up. And my mouth's getting dry.
Have some water.
I don't like to think about this stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I came home. I got discharged from there and came home.
Yeah. And what did you do when you got home?
I worked most of the time. I worked for the L&N Railroad. Well, it was 58, and they transferred us. The L&N and the Seaboard merged. Seaboard Coastline transferred us to Jacksonville, Florida. I was in Louisville, Kentucky. Transferred us to Jacksonville. Then still later, the Seaboard merged with the Chesapeake in Ohio and the B&O in Ohio. It became CSX. I saw them through that merger. I was the assistant manager of rates, and which is an interesting job. And that's about it. I retired. It's about 64 and a half years old. I retired. So I don't remember how many years I've been retired. I'm 82 and a half now. Yeah. But that about does it for me.
Wow, well that's an amazing story. It's a blessing to have you here.
I've never told it to anybody before.
Well, thank you.
Excuse me.
Really appreciate it.
I'll write it
So,
down one of these days and tell my children.
Yeah. Well, we'll give you a copy of this tape too.
Oh, you will? Oh, good.
So thank you for
Okay.
answering questions and helping us out.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful time at the reunion.
Hmm?
Have a wonderful time at the reunion.